energy and trade, to the new arenas of strategic competition defining global affairs. Democracy, global markets, Africa's positioning in the international order, new frontiers of decarbonization. Each discussion underscores the need for resilience and adaptive solutions. Across plenaries, conversations, and collaborative dinners, participants will examine strategies for a more inclusive and cooperative Atlantic community. In a world in transition, the Atlantic Dialogue stands as a platform for bold ideas, bridging regions, generations, and visions, and strengthening Morocco's and Africa's participation in global cooperation within the wider Atlantic. At the core of the conference lies a vibrant and evolving community where the Global South and the Global North engage as equal partners to reshape narratives, redefine priorities, and co-develop solutions for shared Atlantic challenges. Each year, this commitment is embodied in the Atlantic Currents, a flagship report offering original, data-driven insights to guide strategic and inclusive policymaking. And central to this spirit of renewal, the Atlantic Dialogue's Emerging Leaders Program. This year, 43 rising changemakers join a global network of over 450 program alumni, driving innovation, collaboration, and transformative leadership. For more information, visit our website, AtlanticDialogues.org.
Channel 1 is for English, Channel 2 is for French, Channel 3 is for Arabic, and Channel 4 is for Spanish.
Under the high patronage of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, the Policy Center for the New South is hosting the 14th edition of the Atlantic Dialogues from December 11th to 13th, 2025 in Rabat, Morocco. This year, around 450 participants representing over 60 nationalities will join a conversation that continues to evolve where diverse perspectives intersect beyond borders and beyond generations. The Atlantic Dialogues offers a setting like no other, distinctive, informal, and genuinely interactive, dynamic exchanges, skillfully moderated debates, 15 plenary sessions, 3 conversations, 2 town halls, 18 focused thematic breakout dinners, and 3 deeply engaging night owl discussions. In this edition, the program tackles the shifting architecture of global power, democratic resilience, geo-economic realignment, and the evolving security landscape across the Atlantic, from the geoeconomics of water, energy, and trade, to the new arenas of strategic competition defining global affairs. Democracy, global markets, Africa's positioning in the international order, new frontiers of decarbonization. Each discussion underscores the need for resilience and adaptive solutions. Across plenaries, conversations, and collaborative dinners, participants will examine strategies for a more inclusive and cooperative Atlantic community. In a world in transition, the Atlantic Dialogue stands as a platform for bold ideas, bridging regions, generations, and visions, and strengthening Morocco's and Africa's participation in global cooperation within the wider Atlantic. At the core of the conference lies a vibrant and evolving community where the Global South and the Global North engage as equal partners to reshape narratives, redefine priorities, and co-develop solutions for shared Atlantic challenges. Each year, this commitment is embodied in the Atlantic Currents, a flagship report offering original, data-driven insights to guide strategic and inclusive policymaking. And central to this spirit of renewal, the Atlantic Dialogue's Emerging Leaders Program. This year, 43 rising changemakers join a global network of over 450 program alumni, driving innovation, collaboration, and transformative leadership. For more information, visit our website, AtlanticDialogues.org. Under the high patronage of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, the Policy Center for the New South is hosting the 14th edition of the Atlantic Dialogues from December 11th to 13th, 2025 in Rabat, Morocco. This year, around 450 participants representing over 60 nationalities will join a conversation that continues to evolve where diverse perspectives intersect beyond borders and beyond generations. The Atlantic Dialogues offers a setting like no other, distinctive, informal, and genuinely interactive, dynamic exchanges,
Ladies and gentlemen,
skillfully moderated debates, 15
the presentation of the Atlantic Currents Report will begin shortly.
Halls,
Please take your seats. Translation is available. Channel 1 is for English. Channel 2 is for French.
The program
Channel 3 is for
the
Arabic.
shifting architecture
And Channel
of
4
global
is for
power,
Spanish.
democratic resilience, geo-economic realignment, and the evolving security landscape across the Atlantic, from the geo-economics of water, energy, and trade, to the new arenas of strategic competition defining global affairs. Democracy, global markets, Africa's positioning in the international order, new frontiers of decarbonization. Each discussion underscores the need for resilience and adaptive solutions. Across plenaries, conversations, and collaborative dinners, participants will examine strategies for a more inclusive and cooperative Atlantic community. In a world in transition, the Atlantic Dialogue stands as a platform for bold ideas, bridging regions, generations, and visions, and strengthening Morocco's and Africa's participation in global cooperation within the wider Atlantic. At the core of the conference lies a vibrant and evolving community, where the global South and the global North engage as equal partners to reshape narratives, redefine priorities, and co-develop solutions for shared Atlantic challenges. Each year, this commitment is embodied in the Atlantic Currents, a flagship report offering original, data-driven insights to guide strategic and inclusive policymaking. And central to the spirit of renewal, the Atlantic Dialogue's Emerging Leaders Program. This year, 43 rising changemakers join a global network of over 450 program alumni, driving innovation, collaboration, and transformative leadership. For more information, visit our website, atlanticdialogue.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation of the Atlantic Currents Report will begin now. Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, the Policy Center for the New South welcomes you to the 14th edition of the Atlantic Dialogues. The presentation of the 12th edition of the Atlantic Currents is going to begin now. Please welcome to the stage the moderator for this session, Senior Fellow of the Policy Center for the New South, Mohammed Lulishki.
Well,
yours is the last seat available, yes. You can go straight for it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good, I think we are still good morning, I cannot say good afternoon. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present the 12th edition of Atlantic Current. It's a very heavy and voluminous book that comes in 400 pages, and to which 44 contributors put their analysis and their research. But allow me, before addressing this 12th edition, before presenting this 12th edition, to say that since we are approaching the end of 2025, I cannot help not mentioning that 2025 is a historical year for Morocco and for Moroccans. For the simple reason that on the 31st of October, the Security Council adopted a resolution. I think now all the 38 million Moroccans know even the reference 2797 of the 31st of October. And that was the resolution that for the first time said clearly and explicitly that the final resolution of this regional dispute over the Moroccan Sahara is going to be exclusively in the framework of the initiative of autonomy that Morocco presented. This is a culmination of 20 years of diplomacy by His Majesty that has patiently and with some stubbornness pushed for the recognition by many states, I think over 140 countries, and convinced the members of the Security Council that the only way to resolve this issue is through this initiative. We hope that the other party will join this effort in good faith. But let me come back to the agenda of today, and it is only a presentation of this report. This report is a continuation of the contribution of the Policy Center for the New South in enriching the ongoing debate on the wider Atlantic, on the opportunities that exist, on the challenges that we have to collectively try to tackle, and on the possibilities that this wider Atlantic can distinguish itself as a space of cooperation, as a space of inaugurating a new paradigm of partnership, not only between South-South, but also between the North and the South. We are trying to push for this idea in a world that is dominated by uncertainties, where it's rather coercion that prevailed instead of consensus, where instead of a rule-based system, we have transactional ad hoc specific operations, and multilateralism is losing ground and losing relevance. To this 12th edition of Atlantic Current, 44 authors have contributed from all regions of the Atlantic. But we did not limit ourselves to the views of Atlantic nations, Atlantic researchers. We also tried to be innovative by asking non-Atlantic researchers to share with us their look and their perception of this wider Atlantic, its possibilities and its challenges. The volume comes in 7 chapters, and it covers geopolitics, regionalization, blue economy, climate change. I mean, I think all the usual thematics that we all know. We have also some case studies that goes from Mexico to Morocco, from Ghana to Sao Tome and Principe. And from these comparisons, we try to draw some conclusions and some lessons learned. If I may identify three main conclusions from this 12th edition, it would be the following. First, the Atlantic is becoming a genuinely polycentric and interdependent geopolitical space that, if managed constructively, can create a more balanced Atlantic order and consequently a more balanced world order. Two, South cooperation is becoming structural, not episodic, driver of development. Three, and last, there is a common-based vision of the Atlantic as a common-based vision of the Atlantic is essential in addressing transboundary challenges and restoring trust in multilateralism. And it is exactly about this vision that I would like to ask the panelists, the different panelists to join me in 1 minute. But prior to doing that, let me express my appreciation to the team that contributed to putting together this report. And I would like to mention specifically مجد أبو الخيري، شيماء جبار، دريس العلوي البلغيتي، عدنان الحزاوي، محمد العريني، اسماعيل الصبيحي. Without whom, honestly, we couldn't have delivered this edition in time. Now, I think that I've said enough. I think that you are eager to listen to our panelists. So I'm going to call upon them successively to join me on the podium. And Mr. Ronak Gopaldas is the first one that I expect to join me. Yes, okay. Then Mr. Gaston Ocampo. Then Miss Bamiz Olorewaju. Mr. Pedro Sebra. And finally, Mr. Nicolas Vonotas. We tried to make sure that all the regions of the Atlantic are represented. You may be tempted to criticize us by only having only one lady in this panel. I can assure you that we made during 3 months all the possible efforts to have exactly, to have, if not to have a perfect gender balance, at least to have a little bit more than, but we couldn't achieve that. But I promise you that we will make extra effort next time to respect the gender equality and to prevent any criticism that might come from the audience. Thank you very much. Now, instead of asking the different panelists to present their contribution, this year we decided to ask them the same question. What is their vision of the wider Atlantic in 2050? I know some people will say, well, 2050 is too far. Yes. But I think that 2030 is too close. And maybe 2063, if we adopt the African reference, is the one that is too far. So we just decided to be in between, and 250, I think it's a reasonable deadline on which we would like to ask our respective panelists to tell us what are their own vision of this wider Atlantic that we would like to promote as a space, as a peaceful space, as a space where we can promote South-South cooperation. We can have a very smart and intelligent relations and cooperation between the North and the South. The first to dig in is Mr. Ronak Gopaldas, that I would like to hear about his vision about the wider Atlantic. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So like any good analyst, I am going to answer by saying it depends. So I think we are in a new world with new rules. To quote Antonio Gramsci, the old world is dying, the new world is struggling to be born. Now is the time for monsters. And I think we've, in the past 5 years, experienced some really profound changes in the global political economy. We've gone from peace to war, from analog to digital, from a unipolar world order to a multipolar world order, and we're struggling to make sense of this new changing world order. As the old world is dying, we're seeing the breakdown in the old order, but we're not quite sure what's emerged in the interim. So we're in this messy middle, somewhere in between, and we're trying to navigate that. And I think that's why we're feeling this anxiety and this flux in the world at the moment. So in that context, as social contracts are rewritten on an international level, on a domestic level, on a societal and an individual level, what are the key determinants that are going to shape the trajectory by 2050? And for me, I've come up with a framework called the 5 T's, which I think can help us to navigate that. So the first T is trust. Trust is in short supply. We're seeing across the world that it's basically, law of the jungle at the moment. It's driven by interests rather than values and consistency amongst different countries and rules. We're seeing a lot of resentment, which is given around the behavior around COVID, around the approach to the Russia-Ukraine war and Ukraine and Gaza as well. The double standards that have been levied against countries in the West by countries in the global South. We're seeing the old order, which was designed at the end of World War II, being seen not to be fit for purpose anymore and not representing the realities of the modern world from a demographic and a global power perspective. And so in that context, we're seeing lots of profound changes. We're seeing, Gen Z protests. We're seeing rising coups in many countries across the continent. So trust is something in real short supply, and we're seeing that all across the world. So how do we recreate the ability to create consensus and to find common ground, I think is important. The second T, Trump. I think it's quite obvious that we are in a period of profound change. It's not the first time that this has happened in the global political economy. We had this around Bretton Woods, the Nixon shock, we had the unipolar moment, and again, this period is a period of deep and profound change. The era, I think, of American exceptionalism is over, and we are seeing that American foreign policy is being driven by interests, not values anymore. It's about realpolitik, it's about hard power, it's about maximizing America first, and it's unapologetic about that. And I think the US is transforming from the underwriter of the global order to the undertaker. Then the third T is trade. The geometry of international trade is changing quite profoundly. I think over the past few years, starting with the first Trump presidency, we started to see that trade and industrial policy became very much linked to security interests. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is that as countries try to reduce their dependence on single partners, as they try and diversify their supply chains, as they try and hedge geopolitically, that is bringing other countries into the arena. And I think this, from an African perspective, is quite important because our ports, our roads, our rails, our digital corridors become very, very important. It also aligns nicely with the vision of what the continent is trying to do with continental integration under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Mm-hmm. So, as the geometry of international trade changes and the rules of engagement trade, I think this is creating some good opportunities. Then you've got technology. the fifth industrialization is going to be digital, decarbonized, and data-driven. A lot of the minerals needed to power that are found in Africa. And I think that is creating contestation amongst global powers. Are we going to see a repeat of history with a Cold War 2.0 type scenario? We're seeing rising resource nationalism across many parts of the continent. We're seeing climate colonialism accusations being levied amongst countries in the global north. So how do we manage this technological aspect from a geopolitical perspective, from a societal perspective? Will we leapfrog or lag as the African continent? And how do we manage the economics around this, I think is another important question. And then the fifth T is talent. We are experiencing a silver tsunami in many parts of Europe and the global north. More babies were born in 2024 in Nigeria alone than the whole of Europe. So there's a big shift happening here. As the African continent, we need to create 12 million jobs a year. Otherwise, we're going to have big problems. The demographic dividend will turn into a disaster. At the same time, the politics in many parts of the global north is tilting right, but the economic realities require migration, and they require workers to prop up their tax bases, their healthcare systems, etc. So how do you square that circle? So I think, if we recap, trust, Trump, trade, talent, and tech are the 5 T's which will determine which way the world goes by 2050. From the perspective of African countries on the Atlantic, Nigeria's got a demographic advantage. Angola, from a supply chain perspective, with the Lobito corridor, comes into play. Morocco, as an industrial hub connecting Europe, Africa, and the Atlantic, has significant comparative advantages. But before kind of understanding what leverage you have, what comparative advantage you have, and how to play the game in this new world where the rules are being rewritten, you first need to understand the context and understand your comparative advantage so that you can exercise your leverage. And I think we are seeing, these big shifts from the so-called weird countries, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, to countries in the global south. We're seeing also that as we move into a more digital and technological age, we need to bring people along in that, because that was the problem with the fourth industrial revolution. We left people behind, and we need to consider the environment as well. There are opportunities in the shifting global order. I would say from an African perspective, we need to integrate, and we need to understand our role and our leverage in shaping whatever emerges out of this changing, very dynamic context. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Mr. Gaston Acampo, please.
Thank you, Ambassador, and many thanks to the Policy Center for bringing us all together here year after year. My contribution today comes from 2 vantage points that I have the privilege of occupying. On the one hand, at IPDAO, the Institute for the Promotion of Latin America, where we bridge Latin America, Europe, and Africa, as many people in this room do. And the other one, with my experience as an Atlantic Dialogues Emerging Leader program, this program that the Policy Center has been doing for a really long time, and many of us here have shared that experience. This dual lens and this trajectory is summarized in this core message that I have, right? We're talking about this report that we all wrote, the wider Atlantic, building partnerships in an area of instability, this idea of bringing people together. I think we're going to be listening to a lot of the same things over and over again in our presentations. And my core message is this idea that the Atlantic will only matter globally if it becomes strategically connected, right? Building these partnerships. And my points here are going to be focusing on 3 different aspects: connection in a digital, economical, and generational standpoint. Now, when I'm talking about this, I'm going to be bringing some specific examples, either from my professional experience or from the current things that we're seeing in the wider Atlantic. The first point is youth, right? I talked about the ADEL program, this Emerging Leaders program, and the importance of bringing youth voices into conversations. Now, we often talk about youth as a social issue, right? But youth are, in fact, a geopolitical force. Africa alone as our friend here said, is representing an incredible amount of young people when we compare it to other regions of the world. My stats here, nearly 40% of the world's youth are in Africa. In the Atlantic Basin, we have 1.3 billion people under 35, 70% under the age of 30 are in sub-Saharan Africa. In Latin America itself, 55% of new entrepreneurs are considered young people. Right? Yet this idea that we have, our governance systems still treat young people as participants in training and not as strategic actors, right? So something that I've seen through Adele and through other youth leadership programs and platforms is that young leaders are already building companies, driving digital adoption, mobilizing climate action, and bridging the regions, right, in action. This is what we're seeing. So if we're serious about Atlantic in 2050, youth cannot remain peripheral, and youth must be embedded as co-creators of policy, and must be embedded not as people that are being trained, but are actually taking the leadership and are making things happen. My second point is technology and infrastructure. And in the chapter that I was honored to write in this report, I'm talking about our lessons learned from a project that we have at IPDEL in Sao Tome and Príncipe, a small island nation in Africa in the Atlantic that has had for the past couple of years a huge push through the World Bank and other international multilateral development banks for digitalization. So something that we have identified is infrastructure is incredibly important, and infrastructure is something that is being pushed for and is being worked upon in Sao Tome and Príncipe as it is happening all over the world. But infrastructure alone is not enough. Something that we recognize in Sao Tome and Príncipe, where there's around $20 million being spent in this digitalization project, $10 million out of that amount of money is being spent in an underwater sea cable uniting Sao Tome with Príncipe. Now, we're spending $10 million in that. We're not even talking about the maintenance of this and what happens if this breaks, which will break in the future. But then we recognize when we arrive to Príncipe, a small island of around 10,000 people, and the average person does not know how to write an email, use Microsoft Word, right? So we have a $10 million underwater sea cable that's going to give them stable internet connection or enforce the already stable internet connection that they have, but then we don't have the capacity to be able to use that correctly. So something that we talk about in this report and we talk about in the chapter is the importance of knowledge and capacitation of youth, but also different people. Another aspect of this point of technology and infrastructure is this idea of two other pillars that I mentioned. One is digital public goods, right? We talk about the necessity of incorporating technology into day-to-day life. We have people still in Sao Tome and Príncipe that have to cross the island to make an appointment in the hospital, then go back home for a couple more hours, and then go back again, cross the island again to get the care that they need, right? So these things that are transversal and cut through day-to-day life are extremely important, and we seem to be forgetting, right? Because the reality is that the Atlantic Basin itself represents different ends of the development spectrum, and we need to keep in mind of the importance of equalizing everything before we move forward. Another big aspect is transport and logistics. We talk about world's global supply chains. We have been talking a lot about nearshoring, especially now with Mr. Trump and with China and with other actors in the world, right? So this is extremely, extremely important. And the redirection of global supply chains in the Atlantic Basin is something that we should keep in mind. Third point, last but not least, trade and economic integration. I'm from Argentina, even though I'm based in Portugal, and something that in Argentina and in Europe we're listening to a lot about today is the European Union and Mercosur trade agreement. Mercosur is a common market of the South that brings in together Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay. Now, this free trade agreement has been in discussion since I was born. I'm 27 years, and it's still being talked about. Now, in 2019, we all celebrated because the agreement passed through. Still, not today, has not been implemented, right? So we keep on talking about the importance of this agreement. To give you some statistics, 780 million consumers would be part of this free trade agreement, 20% of global GDP. The importance of this, I don't need to tell you about, right? I mean, we keep on talking about the emergence of Trump and the importance of critical raw materials. So this would give the European Union a path to not only rely on the actors that we always listen to, China, among other actors, but incorporate the Latin American perspective into this. Now, we keep on pushing for this, but then if we look critically among the situation in Argentina, in Brazil, in Paraguay, and Uruguay, we cannot agree with each other. We have a Mercosur summit that cannot be confirmed because our leaders are not willing to talk with each other. So I think we need to critically assess this and understand what needs to be done. To close, this vision for the wider Atlantic in 2050 and this idea that a strategically relevant Atlantic, one that shapes global governance, innovation, and economic flows, must become youth-empowered, technologically interconnected, and trade integrated across north, south, and south-south corridors. So that's my point, and I know that we're going to continue.
Thank you. Well, I realize that connectivity is the magic word that all of you are our sister Bamis have also titled her contribution "Cross-Regional Connectivity for a Secure and Climate-Resilient Future in the Atlantic." Can you be more precise about this, the importance of this connectivity?
Very much, and good morning once again, everyone. And I really appreciate this opportunity given by the Policy Center for the New South to contribute to the Atlantic Current. And also, I appreciate the fantastic Moroccan hospitality I've had since I've arrived here. And just to speak to that, it's important that we look at and envisage what kind of wide Atlantic we are looking at towards 2050. And from my own point of view, I'm looking at a wider Atlantic that is inclusive. It has, we have transitioned to that green, low carbon future. It's climate resilient, and there's shared prosperity. And for us to achieve this connectivity, interconnectivity is critical. Now, from the pathways to achieving this, especially from an African standpoint, is to start looking at how we can have decarbonized, decentralized, but also integrated energy systems. It is so critical because in the Atlantic Basin, we have a huge vast of energy resources everyone has alluded to today. Wind in the north and in the south. We have solar in Africa and South America. We also have hydro. And so looking at how to create a network of connected energy hubs is one way to ensure, first of all, that we have energy resilience in the region. Historically, there has been a lot of issues around geopolitics of energy supply, and taking into the fact that we are also going to have more impact from climate change, it's then important to start thinking about, what these hubs and how to integrate these hubs beyond individual energy systems within the country. Now, from that standpoint, it's also important to look at how do we then develop and create green energy shipping corridors, because eventually our fuels, shipping, transport needs to be transformed, and also ensure energy access from a decentralized microgrid solutions for rural communities, because we can't leave them behind, and island countries as well. So when we begin to look at all these things, we see that we then need to start looking at what strategic opportunities can we explore to ensure that we have a just transition. Nigeria, for example, is very big on fossil fuels, right? And we now need to begin to see that even though at the moment we want to have what is called a gasified industry, we need to start seeing how we don't have stranded assets, as we then transition into that low carbon future. Also, critically for Africa, we need to pull people out of poverty. We need to start unlocking human potentials with regards to access to electricity, and that would go from the decentralized microgrid projects. So from that point of view, we then also we empower them, and then also looking at the continental or intercontinental approach where we have what we call mutual dependence on one another in terms of energy networks resilience. It's important we take that into perspective. Now my second pathway, I'm looking at how do we then move from extraction to green industrialization, because at the end of the day, we need to have the green industries that create the energy systems that power the economy within the wider Africa Atlantic. And historically, we know that many of the critical mineral countries reside in the global south, and there has been a historical state of extraction, but now everyone is clamoring, and it's leading to what I think Rowan has alluded to, where you're having mineral or resource nationalization. So now we need to have to get to that point of ensuring that there are collaborations to have in-country or in-country value addition, with regards to creating, those with regards to processing those minerals. Yeah, that's it. So, processing those minerals, adding value to those countries that have them. For example, Nigeria, Morocco, Namibia, very rich, and also Chile, very rich in lithium. And this is a critical mineral, for batteries. And on top of that, beyond the batteries for the energy system, we're also looking at electrification of transport, where they're going to have a massive amount of EVs, running throughout different parts for transportation. So it's important that we then begin to look at systems that create opportunities for this localization of value addition. One of the things that we have done in my organization, NEF, is to kind of do a study, that looks at enhancing lithium value addition for sustainable development. And one of the things we have noticed is beyond just extraction and localization, there also has to be a sustainability approach to this. Many of the mines, are left in situations that have serious environmental consequences for the communities. You are moving people from one community to the other. And so it's important to then look at a holistic approach where sustainability is taken into account, and also new jobs are created, like that has been alluded to, and also ensuring also that we also have created diversified market away from just from Asia, so that the resources we need are internalized within the wider Atlantic. And then, of course, it's important also to look at how do we then have a collaborative approach for trade, right? Collaborative sustainable development for trade, because now we're talking about industrialization. The industrialization creates and would only work when they have markets, So integrated markets are so important. Infrastructure is needed for markets, and there's hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure. I know there's a lot of focus on the hard infrastructure, the road, the rails, right? But also it's important to start looking at the payment systems. It's important to start looking at harmonized standards, that would ensure, and also looking at tariffs. So it's so once we begin to look at this and also see how we can address all these issues, then we then get to a point where we can actually say that with energy access, with the industrialization, we get into a 2050 that we have shared prosperity and works for all members of the Atlantic community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bami. Mr. Pedro Sebra is asking us to deal with uncertainties through transformation and pragmatism. Is it something near to the Trumpism, or is it something different?
Probably close to it, yeah.
Close to it.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation and for setting the stage for this discussion. When you asked us to think about the future of the wider Atlantic, the first thing that came to my mind was precisely part of what I did for the report, which is most of the times we are now being confronted with this overall global narrative that multilateralism is in crisis, right? That the multilateral system that we have benefited so much from over the years is in crisis. And to be sure, there are reasons for us to be talking about a crisis, right? I mean, look at the UN Security Council, where it's deadlocked on some major issues. Look at trade dispute settlements at the WTO, which are being weakened as we speak. Look at the proliferation of sanctions regimes. Look at this adoption of this sort of more transactional, more interest-driven diplomacy for most daily affairs. So we have plenty of reasons to be talking about a crisis in multilateralism. However, my point today is going to go in the contrary direction, because I think in 2050 we will not see multilateralism collapsing in the Atlantic. It will actually be transforming. And so instead of seeing this attachment to strict, rigid, formal manifestations of multilateralism, what I think we are going to be seeing is precisely this shift away towards more nimble, more flexible, more informal solutions that will still try to account or to bring us together to try and have common solutions, common proposals to tackle the same interests and goals that we have between all of us. But if that is going to be the case, I think that sort of proposition also asks us to acknowledge the current state of what we have right now in terms of the multilateral ecosystem, right? So we can talk about the African Union, the European Union, ECOWAS, the OAS, even CARICOM. But when we look at the current context, we perhaps realize that they are not doing that well in terms of responding to this set of crises and the context that Ronan was introducing us to. We have hybrid threats, we have criminality closely associated to terrorist activities, we have climate-induced vulnerabilities, we have pressure on critical infrastructure, we have the erratic behavior of some great powers. All this is creating this sort of perfect storm that our existing multilateral institutions within the Atlantic space are not that well equipped or are not doing, quite frankly, a very good job in responding to. So does this mean that they are irrelevant or they will become irrelevant? Far from it. I think they will very much still be important in this discussion, but it does mean that we have to start looking at other manifestations of how we can still entice, induce, promote multilateral cooperation. And I think here we can look at some of the examples that have already been brought up this morning. We can look at energy corridors, we can look at digital infrastructure, we can look at trade and shipping lanes, we can look at people-to-people mobility. There's ample areas where we are seeing that states, regions, societies at all, are pursuing different ways to establish or create multilateral venues, conventions, outcomes even. And I can give you just two very quick examples that I think very much exemplify this sort of dynamic that is going to get bigger in years to come. For example, if we look at the Gulf of Guinea, for years, a hotspot in terms of piracy attacks, and I'm not claiming that everything is solved right now, but we have seen a turnaround in some of the numbers registered over recent years, and that has not been owed to the creation of a major, brand new, overarching organization. No, it has been owed to the fact that we have seen several informal initiatives that have tried to stitch together navies, coastal states, the region itself, international organizations, the private sector. So we can talk about the influence of the Yaoundé Code of Conduct, we can talk about the impact of the work of the G7++ Friends of the Gulf of Guinea, we can talk about the impact of the new maritime task force that is being assembled to precisely help efforts in the region. But we are not talking about classical, based on institutions kind of solutions, right? We're talking about much more flexible mechanisms that are being proposed and advanced with the hopes that they can produce more quick results. Not necessarily more effective, but certainly more quick. Another example that I also think we can talk about here is about the issue of connectivity, but more specifically in terms of subsea cables. which are right now, of course, already one of the backbones of the Atlantic and will certainly continue to be one. But mind you, we don't have a global treaty on how we should be talking about underwater critical infrastructure. We don't have one single major organization, multilateral one, tackling or in charge of protecting that same infrastructure. Instead, and I think this is an important part, what we are seeing is this very close public-private partnership between the industry, between the public sector, in terms of coming up with standards and regulations on how we should be talking about this specific infrastructure. So governance about or over subsea cables is not coming or being imagined within a classical multilateral venue. It is coming from the bottom up, and it will most likely continue to go in that direction. And so I think if you ask us what's the outlook for 2050, I think what we will be holding together the Atlantic, it's not going to be treaties on paper or a fancy headquarters in a major transit hub. It's going to be pipelines, cables, shipping lanes. And it's around all of that that we are going to have to structure our relations and to find a common way through that. That said, I think we also need to be aware of the fragilities of pursuing this kind of informal, flexible multilateralism, right? It raises a lot of questions from the point of view of transparency, of accountability. How can we be certain that the goals are indeed being pursued through such venues when we actually don't have anything on paper or that we don't see anything in front of us? What if everything starts happening in the backstage? I think that is a very legitimate question, but I think the trend is here, and I think it will only increase in the coming years. And so I don't think we have to assume the worst for the Atlantic all the time, at the very least. I don't think we have to imagine it will be that the multilateralism in the Atlantic will be condemned to fragmentation. I think we can talk about adaptation and transformation. It's not going to be necessarily better, more effective, but it certainly seems to be a trend that we should be on the lookout. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Well, I like your approach of multilateralism. At least we have somebody who still believes in multilateralism. But there are so many issues that needs to be discussed, and this is not we don't have the time to do that. Mr. Nicholas is waiting for me impatiently, and I think he's in the same line as the others, but he's going to be extremely critical to one aspect of Mr. Trump's policy, linking investment and security and cooperation. Please.
Sure. First, I want to start by thanking you for the invitation to be on this panel, the opening panel of this great conference. This is my third time in this conference, so this is great. I want also to thank Professor Arnaoui for inviting here. Living and working in the United States puts me in a position. I think the audience will expect from me to say what the United States, why it's behaving the way it's behaving. But I will not address that very much. I will explain some things about it. It's very interesting that around the panelists only one president was named. Nobody, as if there are no other presidents, because there are many other presidents that are very important, like Mr. Xi in China. So I want to start my comments by saying that the United States has two coasts. It has an important coast on the Atlantic, and that is the historical attention of the country. But it has also another coast on the west, in the Pacific. And at the moment, that coast is more important than the eastern coast. And the coast on the Atlantic is very important because, on the Pacific, I'm sorry. On the Pacific, because across the ocean is the major adversary, the country that the United States recognizes today as the major adversary. So the Atlantic remains, of course, very important for the United States, but currently, the policies of the United States are very much fixed on the other side of the world. There are two issues that I will address. As an economist, I can talk only about economic issues. One is the topic that we addressed in the report, in our chapter for the report, and that is for international investment. There are very good statistics about international investment, and these statistics, for example, of the World Investment Report, show that international investment has changed dramatically over the last 10 years or so. Last year, the investments in developing countries, emerging economies, whatever you call them, were much bigger than the investments in the traditional developed countries. Importantly, Europe is sinking in terms of investments. I mean, the investments have decreased last year by 45%. The United States had an increase in the investment, international investment, even in this climate. But I want to point out something that escapes the attention of most people. The international investment that comes to the United States is very different than the international investment that goes to other countries. And it's very different because the vast majority of it is mergers and acquisitions by foreign investors of American companies, of local companies. And those mergers and acquisitions that happen not to invest in our country because to produce there, but to access technology, because basically that's what's happening. Companies are being acquired and then things are siphoned out. Europe has experienced some of that as well, with the case of the Dutch producer of semiconductors being a big one. We have realized, the country realizes actually, and this involves both parties, that something strange is happening. We look at the other side of the Pacific and we see products that are really very close to what we have. Anyone who is in military equipment these days will realize that the latest fighter aircraft of China is basically a copy of the F-35. Essentially, the country, the United States, the country of Mr. Trump, feels like it is under siege. Now that is for most people feel that this is strange, but how can it be under siege? It is the aggressor, for example, but that's the feeling inside the country. My office is just 3 blocks away from the White House, and the constant discussion in Washington is security. Security, even in universities, we have the most important word these days is research security. We are trying to somehow insulate ourselves from the world. So, in the paper, in the report, we wrote about this very important committee, the Committee for Foreign Investment for the United States, which has acquired new powers now from the Treasury Department, and it's reviewing all foreign investments that are considered to be sort of concern, right? That has alienated a lot of people, and the funny thing is that although this kind of reaction of the United States is really focusing on the other side, on the Pacific, the policy also affects the Atlantic very much. So here, with your question, is my answer. Looking at this, I would say I would agree with Pedro, and I will say that multilateralism probably will be the future, but it's not going to be the same as today, and the reason is that the country that underwrote the system that exists is not subscribing to it anymore. It feels like if you will, it's strange, but it feels like a victim of some sorts. Now, the second, I want to also touch on a second subject here, which is not discussed. An extremely important area of policy for the United States, and I think the European Union and Japan and Korea and China, is artificial intelligence. In artificial intelligence, the United States is going all out, and I mean willing to get rid of all kinds of regulations, willing to get rid of all kinds of environmental concerns in order to build the facilities that are necessary. It's considered a matter of utmost national importance. I wanted actually to ask the audience, who knows Tilly Norwood? Who knows Tilly Norwood? Somebody knows. Who is Tilly Norwood?
It's an AI actress.
Absolutely, that's correct. She now it has been a lady has been created that is being marketed in Hollywood. Who was created from last February to this May, last May. You can read the article in Wall Street Journal on December 6 about Tilly Norwood. It's creating upheaval in the industry. Much cheaper, apparently very realistic, not the type of thing that AI creates, you can find everybody, right? But very realistically created and being actively marketed today. So these things are happening across all sectors. We worry very much that the United States worries very much that we are falling behind China. In the fact that China is following a different approach in applications. They are very much focused on applications, and we, in the traditional sense, are very much focused in getting the next major idea. So $1 trillion, just imagine this number, $1 trillion, which is higher than the GDP of all countries except 12 or 13, is spent on artificial intelligence in a year, right? So we are at that level right now, and another $1 trillion is spent on research in general, and it is an all-out effort. We have been working at the university in the regulation systems for artificial intelligence, and many people, artificial intelligence has a lot of expectations, but a lot of fears as well. It can go wrong. So Europe went its own way in regulating heavily, top-down regulation, risk-based regulation. China went its own way, regulating only generative artificial intelligence and only for models that will be used in China, not for models that will be used the rest of the world. And the United States has decided not to regulate at all. In fact, I don't know how many of you saw the President Trump, 2 days after he arrived in the White House, brought a major executive order about eliminating the barriers to artificial intelligence. 6 months later, in July 23rd, the action plan for AI came out, which is of radical. It calls like AI a race. We are going to win the race. It's very important, the outlook, with very strong language about regulations, about what the country will do. And just a few days ago, on the 24th of November, you see, every 6 months these things, the Mission Genesis is being released. You can see it, actually, is another big executive order. on November 24th, where the government, it calls for a government to create a big platform for all data that is available, which will assist industry and universities and whatever to move forward. So I wanted to bring up these two issues because these will very much affect the Atlantic and the way it will
Thank you.
be in the future.
Thank you very much. I was wondering if we could, if Tilly Norwood could participate to any of our.
She could.
She could. Okay.
Yes.
Well, if you can be the intermediary for the next
In
year,
the future,
that.
I'll bring them along
Thank you.
here.
Now I would like to turn to the audience. I know that they have so many questions. We are left. I know that. I think we all know that our president, Mr. Ainaoui, is extremely keen on respecting the time. So we are left with about 12 minutes. We can extend them to maybe to 15 minutes. And but please, if you can help us, no comments, direct and very short questions, please. The gentleman here. And please, the second microphone to the gentleman here on the other side.
I don't think it works. Does it work? It's loud? Okay, thanks very much for the opportunity. Two very quick questions. Thanks very much. Two very quick questions. One is on multilateralism. I think most of us tend to give a synonym of United Nations to multilateralism, which is not the case. I think multilateralism will always remain. The fact that at this point we're trying to have Antarctic dialogues, family, that in itself is multilateralism. So we have to redefine and just be clear on that. What I think, and I'd like to have your comment on, what I think is going to be happening is that the post-1945 institutions, which we, particularly as Africans, are not involved in establishing, are collapsing, but they're going to be replaced by something new. So multilateralism is alive and kicking, and it's going to continue for a very long time. The comment about AI, is America worried about the content producers? Because we might continue thinking of the actual product, but the content producers and those that are contributing towards the content are not Americans. And AI is dependent on what you feed it. So when we're growing up, we had something called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So the garbage that's going to inform the rationale of AI is based on content producers. And as far as I'm concerned, the Chinese are producing content, Africans are producing content, Asians are producing content, and Americans are not producing content. Is that a concern in Washington?
Thank you. I'm going to collect 3 or 4 questions for the first round.
Good morning. I am Landry Signé, Senior Fellow here at the Policy Center for the New South. Thank you for sharing your words of wisdom and for having us here. So the US has just issued the National Security Strategy on December the 4th. Would you mind elaborating a little bit on its implication for cooperation, especially that the section on principles and also the top priorities are quite aggressive. So that is a point that I want perhaps to elaborate a little bit more on. And also one dimension maybe which may not have been covered during the trend by 2050 that I just wanted to highlight is by 2050, the combined consumer and business spending in Africa will exceed 16.12 trillion US dollar, so which present a phenomenal opportunity also for accelerating development through the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? The lady over there, please. Yeah, okay.
Hello, Nadia Moti, professor, University Mohammed V. It's not a question, but it's the cry of a heart. In this ever-evolving, changing global dynamics, I think we have focused more on the common interests and we have forgot about our human values. And I think if we're going on this path, there's no comparison with Roberts and us. And Will Smith will be very happy to see that his film, Robot, will reveal the future of our humanity. And I think it's really something that we should be really alert. Focus more on our human values and come back to that. And I think multiculturalism will probably come back in a different version, but at least it will be more on the human aspects.
Thank you. If you can give, please, to the gentleman in the front row, please, because he was the first to ask.
Thank you, and a very good morning. My name is Ambassador Professor Mohamedou Ka from the Gambia, based in Geneva. Thank you for your very insightful comment. The question is, to what extent do you agree that amid rising instability, systems resilience, the sheer volume matters most, and their robust multilateralism is indispensable for de-risking uncertainty, revitalizing trade, and enabling shared prosperity across the Atlantic? I want you to explain your insights on that. And also, what is your view on the question on AI? How the wider Atlantic should approach data and AI governance for the stability of the wider Atlantic? Do you think we are doing enough in this space, and should the Atlantic reset partnerships towards data and AI to avert a looming instability in bounds that we have never seen before? And what is the centrality of the youth and capacity and tech transfer in this regard for a South-to-South collaboration, to the point that you made earlier? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, can you give to the gentleman in the back, please?
Thank you, Rabia Muhtar, Policy Center for the New South and Texas A&M. Great discussion. Two quick questions on the AI. China seeked DeepSeek with a fraction of the budget that we in the US have invested, have actually, to expert opinion, was far superior. And by the way, we're not allowed to download it in the government. You don't have access to it. So how are we winning the race with this differential in investment and productivity? On the first comment from the gentleman, we talk a lot about the global South. And a lot of aspiration. The reality is different. Decisions are made in the global North. Contradict that reality. So could you comment on that?
Last one for this first.
I don't think, yeah. This question goes for Mr. Gaston. I want to get a quick reaction on the new national security strategy. With the US no longer being an anchor of the multilateral liberal trade system and now becoming a dominant actor and a prize fighter, and reprioritizing also its regional objectives, how do you see that impacting Latin American countries, and I mean, what are the main challenges and what do you see as opportunities during this new context? Thank you. My name is Diego Marroquin. I'm a fellow at the Center for International and Strategic Studies in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Can you give it to the lady behind me, please? I couldn't see you. My apologies.
No problem. Thank you very much. My name is Wissam Elbi. I'm the Regional Director for the International Development Research Center. My question is really on the absence of regulation or removing all regulations related to artificial intelligence. Since, as you know, setting the tone in the US kind of influences everybody else, and its role in the spread of mis and disinformation. Is this not a concern to the US?
Thank you. I think we'll stop at that, and then we'll come back for the second range of. Please, since nobody indicated to whom they are addressing the questions, it's up to you to take the ones that you consider relevant to you.
You want Pedro to start?
Yeah, I think I have one or two that I can more directly answer. I always hate to overuse that quote from Oscar Wilde, but I completely agree. I mean, the whole narrative about the crisis of multilateralism is completely exaggerated, right? I mean, we have instances and examples where we still see the core fabric of multilateralism working. And so I'm not arguing that it's going to end tomorrow or the next day or next week or next year, but I do think there is some reasons for that kind of fragility and for that kind of narrative behind such a crisis, right? What I would say is, one, it's not just the post-1945 institutions that are in crisis, right? We can look at South America, we can look in Africa. I mean, regional economic communities in Africa are a very good example of how they are being hollowed out and why we should be looking at other proposals coming up. And I think we have to pay particular attention to this proliferation, this growing proliferation of forums, contact groups, groups of friends, because they are now attracting the most attention from the very same states that were willing to put the resources behind creating a formal institution a few years ago. I'm not saying that we are not going to see them anymore. I'm not saying that we are not going to see a potential big alternative coming up, but the trend right now is that going the informal route. And that, I would leave it at that. Thank you.
Please.
I'll take the question on the Global South, and I think this term is one that is often very controversial and elicits a lot of reaction.
We use the New South.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think, obviously the first thing to clarify is that we know that it's not a geographic term, it's a geopolitical term, right? It's a loose definition on purpose. You often get asked the questions, what does Nigeria have in common with Nicaragua, for example? And it's deliberately loose. And the Indian foreign minister made the point, if you're from the Global South, you know you're from the Global South. And the whole point around it is that it creates another seesaw on which to play at in the playground, because the old order was not serving the interests of countries in the Global South. And you take evidence through the pandemic, where countries in the Global South were denied not only access to vaccines, but manufacturing their own vaccines. There's criticism around the climate issue, where African states in particular are asked to be the sacrificial lambs for something that they didn't, for a crime that they didn't commit. Interest rates go up in the developed world, and African sovereigns are locked out of international capital markets. So there's been a lot of resentment, and what the Global South as a loose collection does is that it has a vested interest in changing the status quo. The old order that was designed in a certain context that is no longer fit for purpose, does not reflect demographic realities and contemporary power realities. And so it gives you that leverage and that bargaining power from which to assert your weight and your relevance. So, this is where, in the context of things like BRICS Plus, yes, there are lots of contradictions. We know that. But again, it gives you something of size and scale that is too big to ignore, because it controls the bulk of the global energy resources, the bulk of the global population, and in that context, it's significant. Now, the big challenge, particularly in relation to selling the vision and values for the future to middle powers, is what we need to kind of observe, right? So you've got one pole with China, you've got another pole with the traditional West. These are evolving. And I think the direction in which we go is going to be determined by middle powers. So countries like Turkey, Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, etc. These are the countries that are going to determine what new order we end up with and how the rules of engagement are set.
Okay.
Totally agree with this comment.
Okay. So
I really think that it's the new multilateralism will be determined by these powers, because, as Ronak said, there are many reasons for it. Regarding, to go back to AI, many of you were interested in this. Yes, we are very much concerned with data, and that's why the so-called Mission Genesis is there. This is still on paper. It has not happened yet. It was published the other day. But the data is exactly, the platform for data is exactly where this will focus. The other question about whether the US goes alone or it will involve other countries, it very much wants to involve other countries, but currently, and in my view, unfortunately, but currently the language that comes out is that we are interested in international relations in artificial intelligence as long as other countries buy the whole American stack, the whole American technology stack, the whole thing, hardware, software, everything. So as long as you are willing to subscribe, we talk. Again, I think this is an unfortunate direction, and at some point the decision makers will realize that it is an unfortunate direction. I will not really address your question because I am not a specialist. I don't do defense. I think you want to see somebody who claims to be specialist, but definitely the policy, the external view of the policy is more aggressive. As I said, just a few days ago, I was in Korea, and I gave talk to their Presidential Advisory Council on Science and Technology. Korea is between these two giants. They are dancing around it, and it feels quite threatened. And yet, at some point, they will need to decide. I mean, what to do with this thing. So, it is aggressive because on both sides now there is aggressiveness, right? China is not hiding at all its intentions to be number one. So, that's the problem. So.
I think there was a question about regulation and the
regulation. Yes, the lady. Regulation. Many of us, me including, worry about this. Regulation, at some point, I mean, we have different ideas about what regulation will be. The European approach to regulation, I think, is not going to help them. Because a top-down definition of risk in a technology that you do not even know how it will develop and where it's going to be used and how is very dangerous. Because who is going to decide what is risk in that level? So, right, like we are writing on this. The other extreme of the American extreme currently of not regulating at all, in fact, is not only not regulating at all, but the federal government trying to dismantle even the little regulations that the states may have. So the federal government is fighting against the states not to regulate at all. So I think that is also extreme, and that has the dangers of misinformation. The other question that came on the other side, misinformation. I don't really know. Nobody really knows how this will end up. But we hope that the companies themselves. We hope the companies themselves will come to some understanding. That hurting the public is not going to work very well for them. But it's only a hope. No regulation, just a hope.
It might not have any effect.
With some pressure, of course, some pressure from.
Thank you, Ambassador. So, in your remarks, Pedro, you mentioned that multilateralism will not collapse; it will adapt, right? And we're going to see this rise of more informal solutions. And this leads me. I've been a long supporter of regional organizations, the Organization of American States. I see the wonders of the European Union in Portugal and the rest of the continent. Now, I'm going to tie this to the question from my friend Diego over there. Now, we keep on talking about the US, right? And the fact that the US is in retreat. But I dare to say that in Latin America, in Africa, the US has been in retreat for quite a while, right? And if you ask my brothers in Latin America or brothers in Africa, China is the response to this. And China has been a response, a pragmatic response, a response of solutions for many of us that we can say it's desperate or not, but it has been a solution for us. If you ask people in Argentina right now, they will tell you two things, Shein and Temu. Who knows these two websites, right? My friends in Argentina now, after a really long time, are able to access cheap phone cases and iPad cases and clothes. That is already changing the dynamic. So how am I tying this to the question from Diego? And I mean, Diego is one of the foremost voices of North American trade, and I urge you all to read his fantastic work. But how does this relate to the impacts of the national security strategy of the US for Latin America, for Europe? And is the fact that we are already seeing those responses in the past couple of years, the natural responses. I talked about the importance of the European Union and Mercosur Free Trade Agreement, this idea of, I mean, if it wasn't for this bromance that we have in Argentina between my president and Mr. Trump, if we go to the facts, Argentina is now exporting livestock to China. Our main trade relationships are China, are Brazil. The potential for the European Union being this trade relationship in response to what we're seeing in the US is already happening. But we need to go the last mile, continue talking, continue looking for solutions, and stop this nonsense of political nonsense, where, as I said before in my remarks, we cannot meet between the 4 countries of Mercosur to figure out what we're going to do with the European Union, because we do not know whether we want to meet in Brazil or in Argentina. So we need to, and something that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to close with this, is that we need to address ourselves first and stop pointing our fingers outwards and figure out what is going on in our regions, what is going on in Latin America, what is going on in Africa, right? Latin America is risking no longer being the region of peace. We have a war that might be happening in Venezuela right now. Yesterday, the US invaded, took over an oil tanker, and we're all still talking about, yes, historically something happened, and yes, that's extremely important, but we need to address what we're not doing and our shortfalls internally in each region. Thank you.
Thank you. Bamis, please.
I think it's important to let us know that strong regional institutions play a very significant role and will continue to play that role depending on how it pans out, regardless of the flexibility, because at the end of the day, we need this we need governance, we need security, especially along the Atlantic in Africa, and that comes from a harmonized security framework, and also inclusive of getting all the blended finance. The institutions play significant roles in us ensuring that we have the finances that allow us to, either in the energy sector or transport sector, to develop, and also supports the private sector, because somebody mentioned the role of the private sector, which is so critical. So regardless of how we see multilateralism, these strong institutions will still continue to play a major role.
Okay.
I can only agree with
all
all this.
So we are going to take a second set of questions that I would arbitrarily limit to 3, because I really want to respect the time. Please go ahead, and as short as possible.
Thank you, and thank you very much for these great presentations. My name is Mina Baliamoun, and I am a senior fellow at the Policy Center for the New South. One of the T's, the 5 T's, was talent, right? And I'm also a university professor, so talent is very important to me. And then there was lots of talk about interesting talk about connectivity or the lack of it in the global south, Latin America, same in Africa, of course. With the recent changes to the US immigration policy and the restrictive conditions that they are putting on places like Harvard and other universities, there is kind of a hope in the global south that the talents will move, there will be a rebalancing of talent. But then given the connectivity problems, and I'm not even talking about institutional problems, and also the issue of regulation, how is that going to happen? I think what we're going to see is probably talent moving from the United States, going to Canada, to Australia, to Europe, and not to the global south. And I would really appreciate your intake on this. What should change first? Should we wait for talent to come to these countries to change things, or should we change these things before?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
My name is Nkosana Moyo. I run a think tank, the Mandela Institute for Development Studies. I think there are two phenomena which are very closely related but can be quite confusing. Parasitic relationships and symbiotic relationships. And if one is not careful, one can be confused for the other. I would suggest that these two things, if you look at what we call multilateralism, and that we think it used to work, I would argue actually that it never worked. But it was because it was a parasitic relationship where the host was not killed as yet. And that's the reason it survived to date. And as soon as the host felt threatened, as it would be the case, then it will resist and attempt to get rid of the parasite. And I think that's what, when you look at multilateral relationships and analyze them quite carefully, you'll notice that they're actually not symbiotic, they're parasitic. And the nation state, incidentally, the architecture of a nation state is inconsistent with multilateralism.
Okay, thank you. Here, please. Yeah.
Marcos Freitas, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center. And I was just thinking, and I wanted to ask you a question that for me sounds like an irony, if you look into it, particularly when it comes to artificial intelligence. If China is the one that is considered a closed economy or a closed model to the world, China, in one hand, is open the idea of open source AI for the whole world, which is actually much more beneficial for the global south than the proposal of the United States. So, and I wrote a paper about the haves and have-nots of artificial intelligence and technology. My question is this: shouldn't we be discussing really this alternative that is being offered, open source AI, which is more inclusive to everybody else in this room than a model that is no longer working in the long run for the benefit of the countries, and this perspective of multilateralism a la carte. If I like it, multilateral. If I don't, isolationism. So that's my question to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please give to the gentleman. I think this is going to be the last question.
Thank you. I got it. Thank you very much and for inviting us. My name is Samba Tiam. I'm a roving ambassador at the Office of the President in Mauritania. My question is very simple, and this is the first time I participate in this Atlantic dialogue. During your research, do you have the feeling that countries have integrated the notion of global Atlantic in their policies or not? The reason why I'm asking, I was listening very careful to our sister and to you about energy, how to decarbonize, how to integrate. For instance, in Mauritania, we are developing large green hydrogen project, but we are looking at into a regional perspective, developing an energy corridor with Morocco and with Senegal, and also putting it of power to mine to be able to export more decarbonize mining, but also develop industry. So I'm curious, do they have this wide global in their mind, or is it just we are talking separate? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I come back to the panelists. We have 2 minutes. So just very prompt answers in 2 or 3 words, and I think we can respect the time. Please, go ahead.
Cool. So I'll be brief and take the talent question. So I think we need to reframe this slightly because, you know, we've in the past spoken about brain drain and brain gain and in very binary terms. I think what COVID has done and what technology has done is that we can work anywhere, any place, anytime. So you can potentially be living outside the continent and still contributing towards the continent. And we know the impact and role that remittances play, for example, across various jurisdictions on the continent, key forex earners. We've got payments companies now that are making this easier and removing the cost of friction. You take the example of sporting teams, whether it be football, you look at Morocco, for example, a lot of their players play in the top leagues in Europe, come back, contribute, and compete globally. Same thing with cricket and rugby in South Africa, for example, you know, where you can go contribute overseas, acquire the skills, and create these circular pathways back. So, and increasingly, because there are trade-offs in each and every place that exists, I think it's much easier to, instead of being either or, where you go forever and you don't come back, to do both and. So you can do what I'm trying to do is summer and summer, so I can skip winter between London and South Africa. But I think we increasingly have the option of reinventing the way that we do these things. And I would argue that you can contribute to Africa by not being in Africa.
Hence the importance of connectivity.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I want to add to the same question, actually. The United States, for the first time since World War II, is facing an exodus of good people. 2 of our best professors in my school have left in the last month or so, but they are not going into emerging economies. They are going into global north, one to Oxford, another to Luis University in Italy, and some others that I know go back to China. So there is a significant exodus of researchers to China now. So this is, in my view, a disaster. What used to be the strength of that country, I am an immigrant, right? I came from somewhere else, is now being wasted. So,
thank you.
Do you want to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be very quick and add to this, but in a more pointed way. I think that the problem in and of itself is, if we think about global institutions, multilateral development banks, international organizations, what cities come to mind? New York, Geneva, Brussels, right? So I think that is the problem in and of itself. And the fact that these institutions are sometimes devoid from the reality. I told you in my comments about this 20 million project that we are seeing in Santo Tomé and Príncipe, but then the World Bank seems to not realize that after spending $20 million, people don't know how to use email, right? So I think that also we need to be very, very, very critical and really reappraise the reality of all these institutions and take them to the ground. Something good to close, something good. The Inter-American Development Bank has done something in the past couple of years that is very interesting. The IDB is the major regional development bank based in Washington, D.C. What we have seen in the past couple of years is the fact that the IDB is moving talent out of Washington, D.C. into different regions. And I think that's something good, finally something good out of the IDB.
Thank you.
Something nice.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the question he raised on connectivity. I think, yes, there are quite a lot of global alliances looking at that perspective. You look from the gas point of view, for example, the pipeline going from Nigeria to Morocco will eventually hit Europe. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with the offshore wind going on in Morocco will eventually connect to Europe. So in some tranches, yes, we're beginning to see that connection. And as we go further on down the decades, it will come into fusion.
Yes.
All right. Very quickly, I don't want to leave Morocco as the harbinger of doom for multilateralism. So let me just be very quick, very clear on this. I don't think we can safely expect any kind of formal multilateral framework going up to the US Senate in the coming years and going into the US President's desk. What we need to do is to focus on those experiences that work, on those niches in which regional governance and regional mechanisms are indeed doing something. And when we are confronted with this sort of informal mechanisms that are being put in our place or in front of us, we need to be more demanding and to see who is leading the charge, who is actually proposing this sort of alternatives, and ask for more results. Otherwise, we'll keep talking about something that mirrors or looks like multilateralism, but in reality is just a smokescreen for something else. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you. I will, maybe for the first and last time, I'm going to also be part of the panel, and I will compliment the answer that was given to you about believing in the wider Atlantic. I think that Senegal and Mauritania gave an example of how they can surmount difficulties and do something that is positive for the two countries, for the Atlantic. I think also that the initiative of His Majesty also for the Atlantic is something that is within this logic of believing in wider Atlantic. The extension to the Sahel region is also part of this wider Atlantic. What my sister was saying in terms of this pipeline that will go on, that will surround the Atlantic Africa and go to Europe is something that goes with this logic of believing in wider Atlantic as a possible and a potential area where you have space for building a wider Atlantic community in the very sense of the word. I would like you, please. Yes, please.
May I have a last,
yes.
Just one last thing?
Well, you can have the last word.
No,
not
the last word. But I want to make a last comment.
Yeah.
For me, the saddest thing of all is that the US is retreating, but Europe is not filling up the gap. Somebody else is filling up the gap.
Sure.
Europe seems to be unable for the moment to actually close what the US is leaving. So.
Thank you. I think our panelists deserve a very good round of applause. And I think that all of us deserve to go to lunch and enjoy our right to food. So thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you in 1 hour and a half.
Thank you.
Panelists are asked to remain on stage for a group photo. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation this first morning. We will now break for lunch at the
South is hosting the 14th edition of the Atlantic Dialogues from December 11th to 13th, 2025 in Rabat, Morocco. This year, around 400